Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Eugene. We are here in Singapore where the rat problem has worsened. Officials say rat burrow numbers in the first half of this year nearly doubled from a year ago.
Our rat trail starts at public housing estates, where authorities are tightening their traps on improper refuse management.
I look at how one municipality is nipping the problem upstream by cutting off food sources for rats.
And I'm exploring the tech innovations that are being harnessed in the war against these rodents.
The little figures you can see moving are rats, and based on the heat they emit, authorities are getting a sense of where exactly they live and go. The National Environment Agency, or NEA, has been testing the use of these cameras since April last year, in areas the rat population has been on the rise. In the first 6 months this year, authorities took action against premise owners around 480 times for rat-related lapses, a 26% increase from last year. Almost half of the actions were for improper refuse management.
I'm standing at Ang Mo Kio Central, which earlier this year was identified as one of 4 areas in Singapore with high trade activities and inadequate refuse management. In a span of 4 months, lapses have since fallen.
The other 3 areas have not been disclosed. NEA said that lapses in Ang Mo Kio Central dropped 60% through working with town councils, grassroots advisors, and premises like shophouses, mini-marts, and food shops. Still, the number of rat burrows detected in the first 6 months this year is almost double that in the same period last year. One licensed pest control worker says weather can play a role in how quickly rats multiply.
High rainfall draws the rodents out of their burrows and to places such as low-lying F&B outlets or residential units. And also, we've also seen an uptick in housekeeping-related problems, which then makes the issue worse because when these rodents are drawn out of their burrows, they kind of find a new home, and this home has a ready source of food. So when they're there, they then reproduce very quickly because they're opportunistic creatures. When they can reproduce, they will reproduce.
He says it takes time for efforts to bear fruit. Rodent traps like these are a start. Surveillance cameras have also been placed around to make sure premise owners are disposing waste properly, and the condition of bins is not compromised. Plans to monitor even more areas are in the works.
Earlier this year, the Pasir Ris Changi Town Council received multiple complaints from residents, all on the same thing: rats scurrying around their neighbourhood. MP Indrani Raja says the Pasir Ris West ward has more rat burrows compared to elsewhere in the constituency. She's now roped in government agencies to launch a multi-pronged campaign.
I think the traditional way of approaching the rat issue is when there's a complaint, you try to go after the rats or trap them or do away with them. And I thought that was, whilst it does help, it's a little bit more reactive. I wanted to go upstream by understanding the causes and then developing the strategies.
Multiple agencies are now jointly briefing F&B operators on how to keep food away from rats, especially when it's thrown away. To make rubbish collection areas less attractive to rats, biodigesters that break down food waste may be introduced to HDB bin compounds. There may also be simpler solutions.
Now, bins like this can be a ready-made buffet for rats if they're not closed properly. But oftentimes, people may think twice about touching the bins with their bare hands and throwing their litter around the bins rather than inside them. And that's why the Town Council is considering bringing bins that are opened with foot pedals in the coming months.
The Town Council has also developed a heat map to monitor resident complaints and rodent sightings. It's noticed that reports have fallen by over 80% since the start of this year to just 6 complaints in August.
On site, the officers from Town Council, and we actually do our on-site inspections, and we found that there are lesser burrows. And we also hear feedback from the residents that they also see lesser burrows. So that is something that can point us towards a more positive trajectory in terms of keeping the so-called the rat population down in Pasir Ris West.
The Town Council is also exploring more tech solutions as well as humane ways of culling rats when necessary.
This is a smart trap that electrocutes rats instead of the traditional way of poisoning them. When one enters, the trap detects its body heat and lifts it upwards. It then comes into contact with this yellow grill, which delivers an electric charge for about 2 minutes before the carcass is discarded into an inbuilt bin. This means the trap can be used again immediately.
What I wanted to do was to have a way of doing it that is as instantaneous as possible, so that, yes, we have to get rid of them, but how you get rid of them also matters, and we didn't want something that was prolonged or painful.
The town council has also brought in experts to stamp out what's been rattling residents. They have started a plan since April to squash the rodent population. It involves using thermal imaging cameras to sniff out rat burrows. Conventional poisonous powder is then placed at the entrances where rats go in and out.
The powder is more effective because they clean themselves regularly, and when it's on the fur, they consume it and then will take effect.
The team is now monitoring the results of these efforts. They have laid traditional traps around the estate to get a sense of the current rodent numbers. This metal cage is one of many that's placed all over the estate. They all contain the same bait, bread and peanut butter, and they must be deployed in identical locations for about 4 hours each day. This is so the rats can get used to the trap, making it more likely for them to get caught. The results have been encouraging so far. The town council has seen a significant drop in the number of burrows. There's also 4 times fewer complaints of rat sightings now compared to April.
Pest control is big business in Sydney, with eye-catching trading names to promote the work. Nathalie Heron runs Pesty Girls, a service specialising in controlling the spread of rodents, which are difficult to capture and a nightmare for home and business owners. Today she's off to an outdoor restaurant where rats are a constant concern.
Well, their gnawing habits is incredible. Their teeth are basically like iron, so they need to keep them always ground down. And as we can see, like simple bamboo shoots are quite easy for them to chew, but we've seen quite a lot of damage of them gnawing through bricks to get into wall cavities. Unfortunately, sometimes what they do is nick electricity that might be cabled in the area, which creates short circuits, and they can be destructive to your plants as well. So wherever they really want to go, they'll make sure that they do.
It's not a new problem. Invasive species like the black rat first arrived in Sydney Harbour when the British began their colonisation of Australia nearly 250 years ago. But in fact, indigenous rats have been here for thousands of years. The newcomers are much smaller than the native ricali or water rat. Because they come out at night, visual evidence like this is hard to come by. No one really knows how many rats live on or beneath the streets of Sydney, but local councils are spending big trying to control them. While rat poison is the most favoured method, in more extreme cases, businesses are hiring shooting professionals to kill rats en masse. MOA Contract Shooting says demand for their services has never been higher, from shopping centres to chicken farms. They insist the rats die as humanely as possible, though most pest controllers regard this as a last resort. One man who may have the answer is Professor Peter Banks, who's been studying these rodents for the past 30 years. Aided by nighttime filming, he discovered that indigenous rats, which are regarded as less harmful than their invasive counterparts, frighten off the interlopers and help to keep the rat population under control.
They don't like a fight, and we've done experiments where we've reintroduced native species, and it stops the introduced rats from reinvading those areas, and the native species kind of take over again. And then there's other native species, larger predatory ones, which will fight off these introduced ones. And in areas where we have high activity of these larger native rodents, the ricali, for example, we tend to find lower abundances of these introduced rats.
While the rat population are mostly hidden from public view because of their nocturnal scavenging habits, there's growing evidence they're becoming accustomed to daylight in their search for food. Recent videos of rats in a Sydney shopping mall and cafe went viral. Viewers unable to believe their eyes that these pests were feeding so blatantly. Not only do they have an acute sense of smell and hearing, but they're really clever. They know how to follow patterns and their survival mode is extreme. But it's the bait station that's Nathalie's secret weapon when it comes to dealing with the enemy.
So this particular station has a horizontal rod. It sits into this location here and snaps in for the security, and the baits will sit nicely here. We've got a little bit of a tier to ensure that the rodent can come through, feed and carry the baits through.
Once rats ingest a lethal dose of the poisoned bait, they usually return to their nest to die. It's not a happy ending for the rodent, but a harsh and necessary measure in the battle to keep these premises safe and hygienic.
They do spread diseases. They carry a bunch of diseases that affect humans, and pets and wildlife. Leptospirosis, rat lungworm. Both of those things are kind of growing problems in Australia, particularly the rat lungworm. It's got a life cycle that goes through slugs and snails. They do damage infrastructure because they get into houses and they chew cables and they cause fires and they cause other structural damage. There is significant impact in agricultural areas. In livestock areas, anywhere where they can get access to food, but both rat species will thrive.
To counter the threat, pest controllers have to be one step ahead of their quarry.
You know, ask anybody who's ever tried to catch a rat in their house that's causing them problems will know how smart they are. And they can problem solve. They've got complex social lives. They've got individual personalities. You know, they're amazing animals, and that's why they are so successful.
And while the first invasive rats might well have sailed into Sydney Harbour in 1788 as stowaways from England, it's likely to take many more years to totally eradicate their descendants, who've clearly learned a trick or two since then.
Whether we like it or not, rats are strongly linked to America's biggest and most populous cities. Here in New York, rats are often seen in the subway system or scurrying along the sidewalks or lurking in alleys like this one. Now, scientists say that warmer weather and longer summers, like the one we've had, give rats more time to breed, and urban development gives them more opportunities to feed. So the question is, what are we doing about it?
New York City's Mayor, Eric Adams, is waging a war on rats.
We don't need outside tenants like rats in our homes terrorizing us every day.
New York City is home to an estimated 3 million rats, and in rodent battle mode, the city searched for a rat czar with a, quote, killer instinct.
We needed a maestro. We needed someone that understood, had the track record.
Rat mitigation is more than a quality of life issue. Rats are the symptom of systemic issues, including sanitation, health, housing, and economic justice.
More than 2 years into the job, the rat czar and the city are gaining ground, with rat sightings on a historic decline. But mitigation isn't eradication.
You can think probably have about 50 rats or so living here.
Suzanne Reisman runs a New York rat tour. She's a walking encyclopedia when it comes to our four-legged New Yorkers. She knows their immigrant history, first arriving on German boats during the Revolutionary War in the late 1700s. And like so many of us here, they found reasons to stay.
New York does not have a garbage and rats problem. We have a people problem. And until we learn to control our garbage and our habits, the rats will always benefit from our activities.
New York City Council member Sean Abreu says that's exactly what his constituency in northern Manhattan is doing. Residents in these rat mitigation zones are watched closely by officials to make sure they follow garbage disposal rules or face fines. Abreu has also passed legislation to introduce rat birth control pellets.
When a rat takes a liquid contraceptive, they don't bring it back to their burrow for others to have it because it's liquid. So we think that by transitioning instead to a pellet form, one that it's sweet, the rat can bring it back to the burrow and can share it with other rats.
He tells me New York once had metal trash cans but did away with them in the 1960s, in part due to noise complaints. So people dumped rubbish bags on the sidewalk. New York is now bringing back the bins. Lidded ones are now required for smaller residential buildings. They're also trialling so-called empire bins, the city's new European-style street containers for larger residential properties.
It took so long for the city to move on these bins, and a lot of that has to do with the culture of parking.
People think this stuff kind of just comes from nowhere.
The Department of Sanitation tells us the trash revolution is working, if the volume of rat-related calls to the 311 complaint line is anything to go by.
We've now seen rat sightings reported at 311 go down 8 months in a row since we started the residential containerization requirements. We know that this is working.
Officials say New York won't kill its way out of this crisis because that hasn't worked. They need the two-legged residents to help solve this four-legged problem.
San Francisco is another American city that has seen its rodent population surge. According to a 2025 study led by the University of Richmond, the city has seen a 300% increase in rat complaints over the past decade, the second most of any city in the study. One person who's seen the problem firsthand is Maria Talacona, who runs the pest control company Mighty Men Services.
We're seeing more and more damage to homes and businesses, extreme amounts of damage to businesses, and especially in San Francisco, based on the way the houses are so close together.
Talacona says sanitation issues, among other things, have helped create what she calls a rodent haven.
Anytime you have people and you have food and garbage or waste, it's a paradise for rodents. So we're seeing a lot more garbage on the streets, less garbage services, people dumping.
In addition to trying to tackle those issues, San Francisco is also funding new research projects. Urban ecological researcher Michael Parsons is leading one of them, bringing together academics and industry to try and collect more data on a population that has historically gone largely unseen and in the shadows.
We're creating an app that allows them to take photographs of the rats. The metadata is uploaded to us, we analyze it, and then we ask them to potentially submit carcasses so we can find out what pathogens are on these organisms.
California's restrictions on certain rodenticides means that the city has to rely more on preventative strategies. San Francisco has tested birth control bait in parks like this and set up nesting boxes for owls and other raptors that prey on rats. However, Parsons says the goal isn't to eliminate the rodents, it's to try and keep their populations stable and reduce the risks to humans.
If contraceptives work, for instance, you're talking about a stable population that remains present, but they aren't necessarily dragging E. coli and salmonella bacteria throughout our living spaces, because there's a small group that ordinarily likes to stay out of our way, right? They prefer to be in their burrows.
And it's not just American cities. Places around the world, including Toronto, have seen a dramatic rise. Rat complaints in Canada's largest city are up 186% over the past decade, and experts say that milder winters have extended the rats' breeding season.
Temperature changes can reduce the length or severity of the winters, and so rats can come out and breed more.
That's a situation that is creating new challenges. From rat birth control to expanded garbage collection, cities like Toronto and San Francisco are experimenting with new ways to adapt to a new rodent reality.
New York and San Francisco may be ratty, but when it comes to the biggest growth in rat population, it is Washington, D.C. for the win. Some of them have even been spotted this close to the city's famous landmarks. Few places can boast a starker rodent reality than the nation's capital. where residents are practically taking the rat incursion in their stride.
You better not run across my feet. Don't y'all think it's a little early for y'all to be out?
Rat videos reveal the capital problem in more ways than one.
If you live in or around DC, you already know that the rats are friendly and walk among us.
Y'all, did you see this right here? Did you see that? Did you see him? Look at him go. Look at that. He tried to scare me.
They're unsavory customers in restaurants.
Live Washington, D.C. Shake Shack. You really want to get your burgers here? I don't think so.
And unwelcome visitors at home.
I go to my boyfriend's house and I don't stay here because I'm terrified.
It begs the question of the rat to human ratio in this city.
Say New York is a rat city, DC is the rattiest city.
It's not a competition, but the data does back this up. Here in one of Washington, D.C.'s back alleys, amongst all of the dumpsters, rats are easy to find night or day. In fact, their numbers here have quadrupled in the past decade. That is more than any of the other 16 cities studied in that University of Richmond report mentioned by Ira earlier. And just like in New York, warmer weather and more humans living tightly together are to blame.
We know that these are small mammals that have a tough time in the winter and they're subterranean, especially the Norway rats, which is most common globally. And so in weather that's a little bit warmer later into the fall, or weather that warms up a little earlier in the spring, that means those rats can be that much more active.
Social media gives the situation some levity, but science says this is no laughing matter. And more than poisoned bait, electric traps and rat shooters, behaviours need to change around how food is thrown away.
I often say that rats are an indicator of how well we keep our own nests. And so the cleaner and more sanitized human environments are, the less resources are available for rats. Oftentimes, we're not great at keeping our own nests tidy.
But scientists say the problem most strongly linked to increases in rats is the increase in temperature. And with global warming turning up the heat year on year, that's the toughest one to fix.